we talk about muscle growth. How do muscles grow? Well, there's a couple different ways. One is what we call hypertrophy, which is the muscle cell enlarges, right? And we talk about hypertrophy in general. There's a couple different ways we can talk about that. The first is you got to realize that within a muscle you have the contractile component. It's like the part that contracts, that moves, that we think about. And then you have the part of the muscle cell that provides the energy for muscle contraction, right? The part of the energy that provides muscle contraction is not contractile. It's more like enzymes, it's mitochondria, it's fluid, right? So you have non-contractile and contractile components. Both can grow, right? So what we're going to really focus on in large part is going to be more like the contractile components, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about the other parts as well too if we have time. So how do muscles grow? There's two major mechanisms, or actually we can really break it down almost into three mechanisms. And the first one is mechanical stress, okay? The second one is metabolic stress. The third one is cell swelling. Now I'm going to make these sound easy. So I said, first way muscles grow is via mechanical stress. Second way they grow is metabolic stress. Third way they grow is cell swelling. Now, let me translate that into English. Mechanical stress is load. It's like how heavy a weight is, right? It's the tension on the muscle, okay? So if I have my muscle like right here, and I start pulling lightly on it, there's a light amount of tension. I don't have a lot of mechanical stress. If I push really hard, the mechanical tension increases, okay? What's mechanical tension typically lead to? Things like muscle damage, okay? So we kind of intertwine that mechanical tension with things like muscle damage, okay? Mechanical tension is one way to make the muscle grow. Let's talk about how do we enhance mechanical tension. Well, one way to do it is going to be load. So heavier weights are going to cause more damage. So if I lift, for example, with 85% of my one repetition maximum, that's pretty heavy. If I lift at 90% of my one repetition maximum, that's pretty heavy. Does it make sense? So point is that mechanical tension, one way to hit it is going to be how much you lift. That's where heavy days come into play, right? When you're lifting heavy, you can cause a lot of damage, and you can cause a lot of mechanical tension and a lot of damage, okay? Realize that, yeah, my mind can dictate where tension occurs, right? But if I'm doing bench press and I have 20 pounds, I can use my mind to recruit the chest, which technically place a lot of the tension more on the chest. But if it's 20 pounds, it's 20 pounds, period. I can direct where a lot of that tension's placed, but if it's 20 pounds, it's 20 pounds, okay? So you can't just, with your mind, all of a sudden have a bunch of tension that's going to cause mechanical stress and cause growth. There's got to be weight still has to be involved in that, okay? Does that make sense, everybody? Does that make sense, everybody? Your mind can dictate where tension goes, but if there's no tension, there's barely any tension to direct, you're not going to get a lot of muscle damage and a lot of mechanical tension, okay? That's kind of the point that I need to emphasize to you. So you got to have load, okay? What I'll say is that if you're not really focusing on intent, like focusing on the muscle, that's probably going to be 85% of your 1RM or more, 80% or more is one way to do it. So again, we talk about load. Probably greater than 75-80% of your 1RM is going to really maximize mechanical tension. Those are your heavy days. Anyone else can think of different ways to optimize mechanical tension? Think about it for a second. One answer that I'm going to give you is going to be rest periods, okay? So for example, if I am going to lift 85% of my 1RM, so let's say if I can bench press 200 pounds, right? So about 170 pounds. Now, 170 pounds, if I go 170 pounds and I rest a minute, and I can get, let's say, for 8 reps, and I only rest a minute, I might come back and only be able to get 5. If I rest a minute, I might be able to come back and only get 3. But if I were to rest like 5 minutes between sets, I might be able to get 3 sets of 8. So the mechanical tension is greater, and I can lift total heavier loads with longer rest period lengths, okay? That's the next thing, okay? Trina makes a really good point. Stretching can also be another way to increase mechanical tension, right? Okay? So, to Trina's point, basically, if I'm lifting weight and all of a sudden I'm done with the set and I actually put the muscle on stretch, that's actually mechanical tension. And our labs actually found that interset stretching caused muscle growth. Part of that could be mechanical tension. Okay? Is there other ways that I increase mechanical tension? Yes. I can handle more load on the way down than on the way up, right? So if I'm training with Paul Hauser to my left here, if Paul comes in and I'm doing bench press and he presses down on the way down, that's an increase in mechanical tension on the muscle itself, right? Okay? So I think that's something very, very important to think about, okay? Other ways that I increase mechanical tension is I can progressively become stronger. That's, that's another way I can increase mechanical tension, and so on and so forth, right? Another thing people need to understand is that mechanical tension happens not just on a whole muscle level, but on an individual muscle fiber basis, okay? A little trick I'm going to teach you about is this. If I'm lifting a weight, right, you have to understand that basically imagine that these are this is a muscle fiber, okay? Here's a muscle fiber. This is a muscle fiber, right? So you have what's called cross bridges that get formed. Basically, inside of the muscle fiber, you have these contractile proteins that have to touch to make contraction happen, okay? If I'm slow, if I'm doing like a bicep curl real slow, what ends up happening is I can form I can bind one protein A, B, C, D, okay? These are cross bridges. That creates tension, okay? What if I go faster? I might only have time to do 1, 2, 3, but it's the same weight. Where's there more tension on these 3? Here, or if I have 4 bound together? Is it 3 or 4? If there's more tension per cross bridge, where's there more tension? There's going to be more tension when you have, is it the 3 or 4 held by the same weight? It's going to be 3. What I'm basically saying is that if I go faster on a repetition, I can't form as many cross bridges, and there's more tension per cross bridge, therefore more damage per cross bridge. So the studies show that actually doing faster repetitions can be a way to create higher muscle damage per cross bridge. So that's another way is velocity speed can cause mechanical tension. Okay? So that's basically, again, how you would increase muscle size by tension. The second strategy that we talked about is going to be metabolic stress. But metabolic stress really is intertwined with cell swelling, okay? So what's metabolic stress? When you train, you feel that burning sensation. That's metabolic stress, okay? Cell swelling is the pump that you get in the muscle, right? So let's like reverse engineer this, okay? And discuss what's going on. Our COO, Sam Beeler, is in the facility right now. Sam is enormous. Like, whenever we go with Sam out to, with Sam out to, we went to Hollywood a couple weeks ago with him, and everyone kept asking him if he was like a WWE fighter, right? He's big. Sam's big. Like, literally, his shoulders wouldn't even fit in this screen. I should call Sam in here so everyone can see Sam. But anyway, Sam's a big guy. And he was training with Andrew Barninger. You guys know Andy. Andy's over here. And Andy, when you see Andy train, Andy gets really good pumps. He's a vascular guy. Well, Andy someone talked about strip sets earlier. Andy goes on our Prime Fitness equipment. And it's brutal. You go on the Prime Fitness equipment, and basically it talks about curves, right? So what happens is that, like, on a bicep curl, I can lift more on the top of the range than the bottom range of motion. So what happens is that basically it's harder on the bottom to the first half. So we have this machine that switches the tension so it's harder on the bottom. And when Andy fails, we move it so the tension's more on the top of the lift. So what ended up happening is that Andy does this strip set where it's like, okay, the beginning of the rep's hardest, then the middle of the range hardest, and the end's hardest. So he's doing very high reps. It's like a strip set in a sense, right? Basically, Andy gets this enormous pump, this huge pump. He's got veins everywhere, so much so that Sam, our COO, comes back. He's like, Doc, you got to see this. Andy's got veins everywhere, right? So my point is, reverse engineering this, that's cell swelling. Andy has a big pump, okay? But also, Andy, how'd it feel?
It was painful.
Painful. You had a huge burning sensation. That's metabolic stress. What we're saying is this. Why is this occurring? How do we do this? Well, here's what's going on. Metabolic stress, the big metabolic stress that we like to talk about is lactic acid, okay? Lactic acid causes that burning sensation. A good friend of mine, David Gutnerman, found that when you take muscle cells, you culture them, and you put lactic acid around the muscle, it will actually grow. In fact, this was one thing we talked about. Flex Wheeler was pumped up about this. We talked to him about it when we were at the Arnold Classic. He's like, does lactic acid cause muscle to grow? Yeah, like if you literally take a muscle fiber and you basically culture it with lactic acid, it will grow. And so basically, how do you do that? Lactic acid is mainly increased when you train past anywhere from 30 to 60 seconds of all-out work. It means you're going all hard. So when Andy's doing strip sets or supersets, it's past that 30-second mark and goes to like 60 seconds, right? If I'm doing a set of 5 repetitions that are really heavy, am I getting a big burning sensation? No, that might last, 20 seconds to set? So I don't cross over or I'm maximizing the production of lactic acid, okay? That happens when you do supersets, strip sets, or 12 to 15 repetitions. And so again, supersets, strip sets are ways to increase lactic acid because you're around that 30 to 60 second mark. Other ways are repetition range. If you're training anywhere from like 12 to 15 reps, again, you're going to hit more of that lactic acid realm as opposed to 1 to 5. Okay? Now, let's talk about another thing. Now, the other thing is when lactic acid and all these metabolites build up in the muscle, they pull water into the muscle. They actually pull water in the muscle, and that causes that pump sensation. That's why I say metabolic stress is somewhat linked with cell swelling, which is the pump that you get because those metabolites pull fluid into the cell. Okay, so that's the main thing that you want to understand there. So anything else those are the main things to talk about. What's another way to increase lactic acid? Well, one way is rest period lengths. If I build up lactic acid inside the muscle or metabolites, right? Well, if I rest 5 minutes, that dissipates. It goes into the blood. The blood that's stuck in the muscle dissipates, right? But if I only rest at 60 seconds between sets, imagine doing a set of 15 on squats and only resting 60 seconds. I don't mean like, 60 seconds is up, I'm going to put on my weight belt, I'm going to select the song that I really like, I'm going to get pumped up, Andy's going to hit me on the chest, Paul's going to slap me on the back, and then I'm going to go boom, and then I'm going to set up. No, 2.5 minutes have gone by. I mean, in 30 seconds, I'm setting up under the bar. By the time 60 seconds hits, I'm squatting. If that's the case, lactic acid doesn't escape the muscle. It builds up. All the blood and fluid that's trapped in the muscle stays there, and I build up from set 1 to set 2 to set 3. Okay? So ways to manipulate is have short rest period lengths. Another way to manipulate that is high volume. The combination of the two, sometimes you can talk about very brutal training methods. Again, I was talking with Sam the other day. There's a real brutal method called German volume training. German volume training involves high volume and high repetitions. You do sets of 10. You pick a weight on squats that you might only be able to do 15 reps with. You do a set of 10. You rest 60 seconds. You're back on the squat rack to do another set of 10. Rest 60 seconds, do 10 again. All the way till you get 10 sets of 10. I guarantee you if you do that right, by the time you get to set 4, you are going to wonder basically like how you're going to make it to set 5, right? By the time you're in set 6, you're dying. You're asking yourself, am I truly man or woman enough to make it through this, right? By the time you're like on set 8, you're wondering if you're going to be alive the next day. And by the time, Sam says this, by the time you've made it to set 10, you realize that you're too strong to kill. Like nothing can kill you. You're invincible. You made it. That's German volume training.
After you pass out.
Then you pass out. Right? So another way you can do it is going to be things like blood flow restriction training. Any ideas you guys have? But shoot them out to me and I'll call them out. But blood flow restriction training, you trap the lactic acid in there. You trap that in there. And actually, finally, we have a device that's called the Leonardo, and basically by our good friends, but it's called Leonardo, and it's a vibration platform, and we've actually found that increases lactic acid. So vibration training plus high rep training. So guys, that's an overview of, remember, how do your muscles grow? 3 mechanisms: mechanical stress, metabolic stress, and cell swelling. Translate it, mechanical stress is just load. It's how heavy it is. Part of that is where you dictate the tension is going to be, but part of that is how heavy you're lifting. Heavy lifting, anything greater than 80% of your 1RM. If you're a bodybuilder or physique athlete, I don't see why you really need to go under 5 repetitions, but you're talking about anywhere from 5 to 8 repetition, heavy. Long rest period lengths, probably 3 minutes rest. Higher velocity contractions. Focus is another way to do it, and force negatives. So Rebecca asked that, can negatives do that? You're right, Rebecca, yes. Moving forward, we talked about metabolic stress, lactic acid. That's going to be 12 to 15 reps. Remember, anything 30 to 60 seconds, maybe even 30 to 90 seconds of all-out work is going to maximize lactic acid. So if you're doing 1 to 5 repetitions, no, it's not going to work. Short rest period lengths, 30 to 90 seconds, that's going to trap lactic acid. High volume training, lots of sets, supersets, giant sets, strip sets, blood flow restriction training. So that, I think, is today's lesson. What we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and answer your guys' questions live in real time. Guys, try and ask questions that are related to to muscle growth and or mechanisms of muscle growth and things like that. Someone says, Coach Becky, hey coach, says, what is the benefit of bringing lactic acid in the muscle? Well, basically, Coach Becky, what we found is that lactic acid actually triggers muscle growth directly. And so it basically triggers a growth response. So if your goal is to increase muscle in any area, then lactic acid is going to be important. Eric Olson says, does a longer time under tension build lactic acid? Depends. Eric, if the tension is going from 10 to 20 seconds, yes. If the tension is going from 20 to 30 seconds, yes. Anywhere from that 30 to 60 second spot, I feel if all out is your maximal time zone to optimize that. Definitely not past 90 seconds. But if you're doing like 2 minutes, you're really doing aerobic work, right? So tension in that 30 to 60 second range, I think, is going to optimize it. Good question. Ray, DPT13 says, any evidence for BFR combined with HIIT? Actually, Ray, yeah. HIIT, our lab has found increases muscle growth. HIIT training, high intensity interval training, causes a lot of lactic acid buildup because in that 30 to 60 second range, blood flow restriction will trap that in there, and that will cause even more growth. Thomas said, Christopher Lewis says, nutrition to maximize lactic acid. That's a really good question. That's actually a really good question. Yeah, I know. Here's the thing. Nutrition to maximize lactic acid is typically going to be actually maximizing glycogen. That's where things like having higher carbs could be beneficial because you may maximize that lactic acid production. If someone is low carbohydrate dieting, maybe having a little bit of carbs around the workout could maximize lactic acid. If someone's like, I'm not going to do that, and they're very low carb, having higher protein days twice a week, some of that protein is going to get converted over and increase glycogen in the muscle. And of course, other ways are going to be having enough rest periods between training sessions will actually allow muscle glycogen to fully compensate, and that's going to give you more of a pump. So if you notice, if you train legs every day, your pumps are going to decrease. But if you take a couple days off, you're like, oh my God, it's the biggest pump I've ever got in my life. MHK921 says, what if I'm doing superset which involve 2 muscle groups? So that's not going to take advantage of the lactic acid mechanism, MHK. It's got to be same muscle group. Someone goes, will you write a book about hypertrophy? Well, I'll tell you what, we are going to be releasing the Muscle Ph.D. Website, which is going to we're going to have tons of stuff on hypertrophy on there. And we'll be releasing something that's, I would say, better than a book.
A little bit longer.
A little bit longer. It's going to be
Game changer.
Game changer. That's like nothing I've ever seen. Can you do lactic acid training and ketosis Robin, I like that, Robin Hood. Yeah, Robin Hood, we found that basically when you do, that if you did a ketogenic diet, after several weeks you still have just as much glycogen in the muscle, and so yes, you can. Talk about myostatin. Myostatin, who's heard of myostatin? Anybody? Raise your hand or do a fist pump. If you've heard of myostatin, do a fist pump, okay? So myostatin's a really big topic, okay? Myostatin is what we call a negative regulator of muscle growth. So basically, it's essentially, you have this protein that stops muscle growth by a lot of really complex mechanisms. We have a doctor, a postdoctoral fellow in our lab. Her name's Dr. Hawley, Dr. Ashley Hawley. And she just did a huge thing on the board talking about the myostatin pathway, and you almost have to have a PhD to understand it, right? So, but real simple, myostatin stops us. It keeps our muscles, us from becoming massive, right? There's studies where they do knock out the myostatin gene. Look up, do research, like go on Google and look up myostatin deficient bull. You see this huge jacked bull, like muscles all over. And then there's a kid who was born with a myostatin deficiency, and he was like a couple months old, and his quads were like enormous, right? And there's some kids who have grown up and they're like doing pull-ups at the age of 3, one-arm pull-ups. Myostatin's a negative regulator of muscle growth. Now, I actually think there's a lot of therapeutic targets that try and target myostatin to block it. There are pharmaceuticals. My friend Juha Holmi is in Finland, Jyväskylä, Finland, and shows when you block myostatin, you get massive amounts of growth. So guess what? When you resistance train, one of the ways we grow is myostatin goes down. Okay, high quality protein seems to lower myostatin. Creatine seems to lower myostatin. When myostatin's really high, HMB seems to lower myostatin. So those are ways you can lower myostatin. Good question. Does muscle tissue have different preferences for fuel? Is that the question? Looks like, yeah. So Brett goes, does muscle tissue have different preferences for fuel? Yeah. So if you have a slow twitch muscle fiber, its fuel source is going to be primarily prefer things like fat, and it'll use the oxidative system. If you have a highly fast twitch muscle group, it might prefer more things like traps are a little bit fast twitch. It might prefer more like glycogen as fuel. But like for example, like the calves, the soleus is more slow twitch, so it might prefer more like fat as fuel. So yeah, it depends on the muscle. Can BFR be dangerous? Depends on the situation. I mean, what I'm saying is in healthy populations, lots of studies have been done on the safety of BFR. It seems to be very safe.
All right, we're going to rapid fire.
Okay, guys, we are going to rapid fire. I think that's pinned, the muscle tissue one.
It is, yep.
I already answered that
All
one.
right, I'm just going to put my thumb
Oh,
out.
okay.
Boom.
Okay, can German volume training with compound movements only? Yes. By definition, it's meant to be compound movements.
Right here.
Is IM myostatin inhibitors worth the buck? I mean, depend on there are some myostatin inhibitors that do work well. How to effectively work your lower traps? That's going to be scapular depression. So you're doing a pull-up and you're pulling down like that. Reverse shrugs, basically. Any added benefit of using HMB if my leucine intake is sufficient? Yes. So contrary to that, ectomorph person have an increased level that limits muscle growth? Yeah, ectomorph may have higher myostatin levels. Where can I find the information that you explained today? Look at musclephd.com on Friday. Are there any types of foods that prevent muscle growth? I've heard pineapple has enzymes in it that does this kind of thing regarding proteins. Soy potentially. What amino acids are better to improve muscle recovery? The BCAAs. Slow reps versus fast reps? I think fast reps. But use them both. You can use slow reps as a switch up. Which method has more to do with satellite cell proliferation? All three of them increase satellite cell proliferation. Okay, lactic acid creates pain, and pain remain even 24 hours later. So how can we tell if lactic acid advantages? Lactic acid has a half-life of 30 to 60 minutes, which means after 2 hours, it's pretty much out of the system. So the next day if you have pain, that's muscle damage, not lactic acid. How often do you think you should train each specific muscle group for maximal growth? You should periodize between 2 days a week, high volume, 3 days a week, moderate volume, 5 days a week, low volume, and then cycle back around. Is it good to take 5 grams of creatine in the morning for the rest of my life for cognition mostly? I mean, the rest of your life is a very wide thing to say. I do think it's beneficial taking 5 grams of creatine a day. Does lactic acid affect work when training endurance, high intensity, for example? Yes. Lactic acid can technically lower your work output. That's why longer rest allows you to do more work. I train my biceps on negative reps, supported by another live. Okay. And have been seeing a huge difference? Amazing job as always. Oh, thanks, Rebecca. I really appreciate the feedback there. You're awesome. And thanks for following along. It means a lot to me. How many grams of protein you need for keep muscle protein synthesis for muscle? Okay. Anyway, you need about 30 to 40 grams to maximize protein synthesis in a meal, per meal. Should exercise where muscles train fully lengthened? In other words, you need to train a muscle in a fully lengthened position. I do think that that's ideal, yes. In your professional opinion, do you ever see magnetic resistance being used as an alternative form of resistance training? Yes. Can't answer that one. Oh, fist pumps. You guys, a lot of people have heard myostatin. Good job, guys. Should I pause after using weight stretching after a set? So basically the question is, should I do intraset stretching where I pause on the stretch in between sets? Yes, it's an effective way to make your muscles grow. If I stretch between sets, how long? Our study showed 30 seconds. Okay. Which mechanism of hypertrophy has more effect on satellite proliferation? No one knows, so I do all of them. How do you stimulate myostatin? You don't want to stimulate it, you want to suppress it. And the way to do that is all the mechanisms I talked of hypertrophy, HMB, creatine, high protein levels, periodization. How do you increase lactic acid threshold? You train above where you have lots of lactic acid in the muscle.